For this, we're not going to need, we're going to have a common denominator to begin with, so we won't have to get a common denominator. But I'm just going to show you what it looks like just for regular fractions. Let's say 1/4. If you have a common denominator already, then of course all you're doing is copying down that denominator and then combining the tops. 3 plus 1. Normally you just do it in your head, but all of these steps are going to be exactly the same with rational expressions, except for at the very end you might have to factor and cancel like we've been doing. So right now, if you have a common denominator, you just write that denominator once and then you combine the tops. You're only doing this whenever you're adding or subtracting. So if this is a plus or a minus, that's when you leave the denominator, write it once, and combine the tops. We already have the denominator exactly the same. That's very important to be able to notice, because later on they won't be exactly the same and we have to get them. We have to get a common denominator, but right now we're starting small steps. The denominators are the same, so all I'm going to do is write the denominator once. So x squared minus 2x minus 3. Write the denominator once when it's the same, and then this, just make sure I have an x minus 3 in the. So I've combined the tops. You can't really combine any like terms because it's an x and a 3. However, we can factor and simplify in this case. So at the end, instead of just simplifying the numbers to something, if you can, or reducing the numbers, here we're going to factor and simplify if you can. Sometimes you won't be able to, but I think in this case you will be able to. So on this, you can factor the bottom. You can't do anything with the top, so just -3 in the top, -2, and that would just be 3 and 1, and one of them's negative. It would be a -3. Since there is no coefficient in front of the x squared, or it's just a 1 coefficient, we can immediately jump to. Yeah, do you see? X minus 3.
Over 1?
She got it.
I mean,
she
1
got it.
over x. Okay.
So here, these cancel. So factor and simplify, that's what we're doing here. They cancel. However, they always cancel to 1. And if there's nothing left over in the top, it's actually just a 1 in the top. The x plus 1 is in the bottom. Does that make sense? So in this one, two things that I want to point out. First, you're going to have to put this in parentheses because there's more than one thing. Here we took the negative and gave it to the 3. Well, you have to do that to both terms here. And it's a super x. That's the other thing that I wanted to point out because there's a coefficient. Question? So this will become positive x, and this will become -2.
Okay, so why do we have to distribute that?
Because if you,
in the first one.
well, the first one only had one term. So we did really distribute it, it's just not to multiple things here.
Okay.
So we want to subtract all of what's in this numerator. So that means you have to distribute the negative to this and to that.
So I should get a piece of candy though.
You should copy my answer.
Yeah, you should get a piece of candy because you copied the wrong
No,
answer.
this is the worst.
This is in the video
I
now.
just didn't know where to go and I was like, oh, okay.
All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is distribute this negative. And then I'll write the -1 plus x minus 2. And then the denominator, I write once because it's the same denominator already. Minus 5x minus 3. And then combine like terms in the top. So I have a -1 and a -2 that I can combine and get x minus 3. And then I will factor using super x. You have to remember that you do the first coefficient times the last, number. So 2 times -3 is -6. The middle number in the bottom, -5. 3 times 2, no, 6 times 1? 6 times 1. With a negative on the 6, thank you. And then divide by 2. So we're dividing by 2x here. You cannot reduce that, so that becomes 2x, and then it's positive 1, so 2x plus 1 for this piece. And then this one reduces, you can divide by 2 and get -3, divide by 2 and get x. So you get x minus 3. Again, these, how? The -1 minus the 2 becomes -3. And then the x you can't combine with anything, so it stays there. Then, since there's nothing else in the top, it's actually just 1. And then 2x plus 1 in the bottom. So, just be careful. You do have to distribute the minus here. Then combine like terms in the top. You're only writing the denominator once because it's already a common denominator. First, the bottom you're going to write once because they're already a common denominator.
Oh, I know what the answer is. Is it 1 over x minus 1?
Not minus.
Plus?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
So you write the denominator once. Then this gets distributed. So I'm going to say minus 2x minus 5, 3x. So you don't do an x method on this because it's not x squared here. Do we see the difference for that? We can combine like terms. That's what we're trying to do. We have a 3x and a minus 2x. Does that make sense so far? So that part becomes, well, if you have 3 x's minus 2 of them, you get a single x. Copy down the minus 5. X squared minus 4x minus 5.
Okay. So that makes sense.
So I can do the x method for the denominator. That's not a negative. I don't know why I just scribbled it out. That looks worse. Whatever. -5 in the top, 1 times -5, and then -4 in the bottom. That would just be 5 and 1 with the 5 negative. There is a 1 coefficient in front of the x squared, so we can immediately jump to x minus 5 and x plus 1. X minus 5 from the top cancels. Remember, it cancels to 1, so we have 1 over x plus 1 as our answer. The last thing that I want to show just really quickly, sometimes nothing cancels out. So I'm just going to do this one really quickly. Example 4. If you have, let's just say, 7 minus,
Do we have to write this one down?
whoops, yeah.
It's called learning.
Are we ever going to have one where the denominator is different?
Not today. So you should just be able to look at this and write down the answer because nothing cancels out. You could write in the denominator just 2x minus 3 because it's the same already, and then 7 minus 3x. Combine the top, but there are no like terms, so that's it. You can't cancel out these 3's because there's this subtraction in between them. They have to be exactly the same if you're subtracting or adding to cancel out. Just like this, it's not just an x that we're canceling out. We're canceling out the whole entire term, x minus 5, x minus 5. So this we consider as one term, 7 minus 3x.
Do we have to put all our stuff in the standard form as well?
No.